So let's start at the beginning.
A very good place to
A
start.
very good place to start. This is an easy one. Asher, Michelle, what compelled each of you to bring this story to the stage now?
I think I'll start that one, but I'll let you follow like right after, yeah? So for me, as I'm sure for many of you, October 7th and its aftermath left me profoundly confused and deeply pained, and I remember in the immediate aftermath of October 7th getting briefly very involved in the whole social media of it all, right? But that's not a conversation, that's a performance. So I put the internet away and I sat with my thoughts for a while, and I had lots of people in my life who removed themselves, who left the room, who left the conversation, and you know, I had this fantasy of like what were the conversations that I would have with these people if I could keep them in the room. So I created a device to keep them in the room, which is the hurricane. And then I wrote the first draft of it in September 24. And shortly after, my dear friend and co-conspirator, Evan Bernardin, sent the play over to Michelle at Miami New Drama, and then let you take it from here.
I don't know if people really understand how brave Asher is. I know it's, oh, artists are brave, but what Asher did, which is, first of all, so vulnerable and just so dangerous. I mean, he is putting up his reputation as a playwright in the line, doing a subject that very few theaters would be interested in touching, because there's a lot of uncomfortable things in the play. And by the way, this is a play that belongs in Miami. This is to some degree a home game for this play, where, while there were maybe a few people handing out flyers, this is a very safe space for Jews to exist, this community. And after October 7th, in the same way that Asher felt, I also felt like, oh, I have this understanding now that there's not going to be a lot of Jewish plays being produced today. There are going to be a lot of Diary of Anne Frank and stories about dead Jews, but complicated Jewish stories about today, they're not going to be produced at the scale they should be. Very few theaters are going to do it, so I felt that responsibility, and we created our Jewish Play Initiative, and this is the second show, part of that series. And I have not missed a single day of performance because the play is one part of it. But seeing the audience respond to Asher's work and the work of the director and the actresses is a whole performance by itself, and it's very exciting.
Absolutely. And maybe you can add just a word or two about why specifically Miami New Drama. I know you have this Jewish initiative. Tell us a bit more about it.
I mean, we are the largest bilingual theater in the country. We do works in Spanish and in English, and we only or mostly only do world premiere plays, which is plays that have never been produced anywhere else. Sometimes we commission that work and we spend years developing until it's ready. And Miami is, I think, the perfect space for new Jewish work to come to fruition. If you look at the country right now, there are very few spaces. Who would have imagined a few years ago that I'm saying this and it would resonate? But Miami is one of the only few spaces where we can create this work. By the way, complicated work, no matter where you stand politically.
Absolutely.
There's many people who left because they were very upset about what characters were saying.
Yes.
So, you know, the hurricane doesn't allow the actors to leave, and sort of the shame of having to walk through the theater doesn't allow the audience to leave. But a few of them do leave, but it's such a minority, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation today.
Yes, it felt a bit like, goodness, now I'm forgetting the name, but that Tarantino movie where he like redoes he does this theater where he invites Hitler to the theater.
Inglourious Bastards.
Inglourious Bastards. I felt like we're all in that theater, and they've just locked the doors, and the fires are raging. But it was such an incredible experience just to listen to both sides of that discussion. So let me ask a question to you, Michelle. The story is really about geopolitics. Sorry, Asher. Michelle, Asher.
Were those both very good-looking?
Yes.
It's logical. You couldn't tell us apart.
It's the hair. It's the hair. So Asher, the story is ostensibly about geopolitics, about the Israel-Palestine debate, but then it also becomes very clearly, and particularly after the intermission, it becomes a family drama, and you start wondering, what is the real hurt there? Is it the political situation, or is it the family pain? And I'm wondering how you thought through that, and also, maybe a little tag on, did you ever wonder whether inserting the family drama would kind of diminish the stakes of the geopolitical conflict you are actually acting out?
So I initially set out to write a play about Zionism using a family as a device. And very quickly in its development, it shifted to become a play about a family using Zionism as the device. And for me, the past 5 years, I think we've seen a lot of leaning into identity politics and the idea that, it used to be that we would have our opinions as one thing and our identity as another. And a lot of, mostly because of the language of social media, right, our opinions and our identities are fusing. So when somebody has an opinion that is different from our own, or we see it as an affront to, or even an attack on our character, right? How can you feel this way? This is an attack on me. And it's led to essentially the death of discourse. Because now we can't be uncomfortable. We can't have uncomfortable conversations. People disagree with us, because if they disagree with us, then they disagree with who we are and our very existence. And then how can we coexist? Because we have block and mute buttons, we can just make them disappear. But that's not how this world works. We still have to share this world with all the people on it, whether or not we want to see them. And so this idea of sort of like going into your own corners and blocking yourself off from people who think and feel differently from you, play that tape to the end. If we're all just stuck with the people who feel exactly the same way as we do, and we don't hear at all, ultimately it is about, like, again, being uncomfortable, like sitting in the discomfort of having an uncomfortable conversation, understanding that that is a feature of a good relationship, not a bug. As it pertains to the story, how do you put so much history and so many facts and opinions into a 2-hour play? How do you put thousands of years of history into a 2-hour play without destroying your audience's brains? And the truth is that, like, every line in this play potentially opens up an entirely new play. Like, this play was not meant to be the end of a conversation. It was very much meant to be the beginning of one. And so the idea was that like, especially when it comes to conflict, right? It's always about who did it first, right? Like who started it, as if litigating it is somehow going to make it come to an end. If we can all agree that it was actually you who started it at this time, then we can move forward. That's not the way this works. And of course, similarly with the brothers, right? It was like, who started it? For me, it was really interesting to try to use the brothers as the device of kind of mapping on, basically using Act 1 to sort of talk about the conflict, and then Act 2 to really like make it personal and make it about these two brothers who have deep-seated issues with each other from childhood, and ultimately how we can find a way back together, even though we have hurt each other.
But did they find a way back together?
I mean,
Well, there is a little bit of that at the very end. I want to, by the way, here I'm going through folks' questions.
Sure.
With my prompter. I think there's something very profound. Can all, it's no surprise that Asher is so eloquent and smart with what he said. Everything he said resonated so much, and I think it can open up even a little bit more, because not only after October 7th, but look at American politics in the last 10 years, in the last 12 years. We are a polarized country. We see the world in completely opposite ways. We no longer have any shared space, which is a terrible thing for society, because we as a country, we need a common narrative. And if you lose that common narrative, you break down. And I think that's the big question of the play, is how can a family retain the narrative of the family when your own kids believe something that is in complete opposite to something you hold so dearly. And I think that is the great theater does not try to answer a question, right? That would be bad theater if Asher would tell us what the solution is. But Asher phrased the question in the smartest possible way, with evidence here and there for us to be able to do the work afterwards. And I think that's what great theater can do.
It was magnificent, yeah. I did have a question, though, about, it did seem a bit like you were putting your finger on the scales, creating Aaron's character as such a vulnerable guy. I mean, he seems to be, the family kind of dismisses him as a little bit of a mess up. I mean, a big bit of a mess up. He has an emotional support human. And I'm wondering if that is a verdict on his opinions as well.
It's an interesting question. I don't know. I do think that, again, like it's all about family dynamics, right? Like, you know, there's always that one person in the family that like everyone kind of decides is like
To pick on.
yeah, and you know, for me it was about like writing a real family and having those dynamics, understanding like who is the mediator, like who shuts it down, like who is the meddler, you know, who is the micromanager, and less of a judgment on necessarily their positions, but more just an idea of like how do I fully flesh out these characters and make them you know, three-dimensional people, as opposed to just like the vessel for certain arguments to be said through. You know, ultimately, it doesn't matter how right the characters are if we don't care about them.
For sure. Actually, I mean, all the characters were super interesting. I really liked Bex, and I was wondering, are you Bex? Bex is like a complex character, exhausted, thoughtful, you know, not easy to pin down, artistic, you know.
So I'm all of them.
You're all of them.
And yes, I feel like I do lean a little bit more towards Bex, because ultimately, you know, for me, I'm not, you know, when it comes to horseshoe theory, if anyone knows what that is, it's the idea that like when you're moving on a spectrum, the further you get to the extremes, that closer it comes together. I'm not interested in the straight parts of the horseshoe. I'm very much interested in exploring the curve. So, you know, so like no one on the stage is like full tilt Hamas, and nobody on this stage is like a Tendler or Ben-Gvir, exactly. So, like that to me is kind of the realm of acceptable conversation when it comes to this, because ultimately when you move away from that, then nuance dies,
Yeah.
and then it becomes about us versus them, and there's no discourse. It's we are right and you are wrong, and we are not going to hear what you have to say because your opinions don't matter. And you know, and this is again like why, like so much, like again, making it about a family, right, that has a vested interest in finding a way back together, finding a path forward. I mean, I remember after this latest election, seeing all these people online telling other people like, don't go home to Thanksgiving if people, if the people in your family voted differently than you,
Right.
or as it was phrased, voted against you.
Yeah.
And like that's cult behavior. You know, cutting yourselves off from other people because they disagree with you, especially family member. That's literally cult behavior. And like we have become more polarized, and the idea that we need to fight. Like when we fight, we lose. And we are in this culture right now where we are flattening everything into kind of like we say in the play, into for or against, Zionist, anti-Zionist, you know, and that's it. And it doesn't matter how, we don't see people as complex individuals anymore. We flatten them into these positions and labels. But when we actually sit down in a room, we talk to each other, when it's not just comments on the internet for the world to see, but when we actually come face to face with each other's humanity, is when we can find a way forward, and when we can discover that actually we do have a lot in common. And instead of focusing on the differences so hard, we are able to focus on what brings us together. It's really interesting. When it comes to politics that are up here, we're so divided, right? But when it comes to local politics, when it comes to like, hey, we need to put a stop sign on our street corner because cars are moving too fast, suddenly we can all work together. Suddenly none of that shit matters anymore. And I really feel like we need to get back to that more. We need to get back to like the community aspect, our neighbors, our friends, and find and understand that like all this stuff actually doesn't really affect us. It just pulls us apart.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my little spiel.
That's a great spiel. You put in some incredible one-liners throughout, all of which could be titles of theses. One was very early on, said in a very casual way, many things could be true at once. I think it was about David's outfit, like he looks good, he doesn't look good. And I thought that was a really cool foreshadowing of what's coming. But I'm wondering, do you really think that that's true, that many things can be true at once? And can we actually hold that when our emotions are high, and our anger is high, and our fear is high?
I mean, yes, many things are true at once. You know, like I am wearing a blue shirt. You know, you are wearing a salmon shirt. Like those are both true. This. I know that's a silly example, but many things are true at once. This idea of searching for the absolute truth, the truth that out-truths all the other truth. That's bullshit. It's also the truth is, we are seeing different truths today in a way that we really never have. Ultimately, until the advent of social media, right, we all had more or less agreed on media, what I think most people refer to as legacy media, right? There were like the few news outlets that we all got our information from, and it wasn't a 24-hour news cycle. You would watch the morning news or the nighttime news, or you'd read the newspaper. But now, especially with social media and with the algorithms, we're not even reacting to the same facts. Yeah. So then it comes back to this thing like, well, how can you be reacting this way to the thing that we're both seeing if I'm reacting this way? Because we're not both seeing it. We're not seeing it at all. And that person is getting a very specific feed and a very specific algorithm, and I'm getting something completely different. And so we're both reacting to what we're being shown. And again, it's this idea, okay, many things can be true at once. And how do we make sense of all that? And how do we find a way to hold space for the fact that these things are true and these things are true? I'm very careful with the way I use the word and but. Mm-hmm. Because it's an add-on. Again, this thing is true and this thing is true. Where the word but negates everything that came before it. Oh. So this thing is true, but this thing is also true. Then the first thing becomes not true. And is additive. Mm-hmm. And the more we understand that like we have to look outside of ourselves, that we have to consider that every single human on this earth is just as complicated and complex as we are, which is a thought that blows up your brain a little bit when you really think about it. But like once you can sort of pull that in, you can start to meet other people and yourself with more grace.
Yeah.
Let me actually, sorry, because
yeah.
I got to push my friend Asher a little bit.
Okay,
Let me
please.
push- Asher, you lived 10 years in Israel.
I did.
You're an Israeli citizen.
I am.
So while what you're saying is 100% true, that we need to find a way, especially in the local politics, et cetera, but whatever, with people who are close to you, celebrate something like how celebrate October 7th, for example. How, in practical terms, should we deal, like, should you, as a human, deal with that?
If I had the answer.
No, but is it try to just embrace the humanity of both and try not to talk about it, or decide it might not be a good idea for us to, I mean.
I think you have to try to, you have to try to engage. You have to try, because again, yes, there are people who will share things that make your skin crawl. And still, we have to find a way to live with these people. And I realize that, like, yes, sometimes, and there's a question, well, how do you live with somebody who wants to kill you? You have to find a way. You have to find a way to make it work. And sometimes that's not clean, and sometimes it's not pretty, and sometimes not, and listen, it's never easy. But ultimately, we have to risk engaging.
Yeah. Actually, in my reading, I don't think this was seeking a solution to the geopolitical problem. It was asking, how can we live as a family? It's really more of a Jewish story than an Israel story. And when Mitch yells, can't we just be a family or something like that? I think that's really the question that's being asked. And I don't think when they were fighting it out, I don't think they ever convinced each other of the righteousness of their sides. I think they just finally said they're sorry because they were about to die. Yeah.
I'm not going to confirm or deny.
Confirm. Yeah.
So, if Madonna or the family died, we're not going to.
I have a kind of delicate question. I hope it's okay to ask. This question touches on the relationship between art and intimacy. This play feels profoundly real. You said you tried to make it feel like a real family, and it really did feel like a real family. I know that many of the central elements are actually autobiographical. Without asking you to disclose anything that you would rather keep private, I'm curious how you navigated writing material that was so close to home, and how did you think about the line between art and real life? And who were you worried about hurting? And did it make you feel differently about people in your life going through this process?
As with most of my work, it starts with my own life, and then the more I develop it, the further removed it becomes and the stronger it becomes. And as is the case with this play, the Rosenbergs are truly their own original family. And there's always that perception, right, of like, again, like how much is autobiographical, but it also is the idea of like, how do I turn up the volume and raise the stakes? Like, there was never, my siblings and I never threw each other around a deluxe mini villa. I will guarantee you that.
Just wait till Rosh Hashanah.
When it comes to concern over who I'm hurting, it's an interesting consideration, because I'm also weighing who I'm healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that I really needed this play for a myriad of reasons. And I felt that I wasn't alone. And the more people who I showed this play to, the more that was confirmed. Then the more it became clear that this needed to move from page to stage. And you know, there's a line that Aaron has in his scene with Zephyr, where he says something to the effect of, I know that if I do nothing, I know I can't do nothing, essentially, where he talks about how either way he loses something. You know, if he does nothing, he loses his self-respect, he loses his ability to look in the mirror. You know, would it be easier to sit this one out? Absolutely, but you know, I'm terrified of the person I become if I do. And that was, for me, you know, what inspired me to write this play, is that I didn't feel like I could just sit this one out. And this play really is essentially my coming out as a Jewish playwright.
Wow.
And I'm so glad you did not sit this one out.
Yeah.
I don't know how, in the theater world, I don't know how to explain to people that no one is writing this play. No one is writing this. So it's a jewel that we were able to get a brave enough playwright to do it. So, Asher,
We are
again,
so
thank
grateful
you.
for your courage.
We should.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a few questions. I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible so we can touch upon them all. You could still find a few minutes to write. There's a question, do you think art can help combat anti-Semitism, or does it sometimes amplify the tension? And my question to add that was that even your intention?
Ultimately, I think conversation combats anti-Semitism. I think actually, like sitting down in rooms with people and getting to know them combats anti-Semitism. Whether I think art necessarily combats art can be used to combat anti-Semitism. Art can also be used to spread anti-Semitism. So I think it ultimately depends on the art itself.
So there's a question, have you or your team experienced any anti-Semitic reactions or incidents in response to the Zionists, either during the performance or following in promotion? If so, have you addressed them? It's a home game, right? It's very minimum in this production. We've got some people handing out pamphlets, etc. I don't know if you noticed, we have a very serious security operation outside, just in case, that we normally do. When you came for English only, there was no one at the door. Not the case here, but Asher, throughout the development, have you found?
Not really. Now, more, you know, there's the social media of it all. Someone recently called us Jew faggots, which I just loved. I also know that, like, you know, it's funny because on the one hand, it's like, it's just kind of proving the need for this play. Because I also know that, well, I don't know. I assume that most of these people who have very negative things to say about the play are also people who have not seen the play. Because I do believe that everybody will hear something they very much agree with in the play and something that they very much disagree with in the play. And again, it's this idea that, like, yes, and it's fucking uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to hear people say some of those things, and yet we stay in the room.
There's a question about the audience reaction to moments like self-hating Jew, and if that's disparagement of people who are concerned about how Arabs are being treated, or when Dana's monologue. How do you feel about audience reaction at that moment?
I mean, look, you know, that's the beauty of live theater. It's like you feel a thing and you react a certain way. It's by design. If you felt so moved to react, we've done our job.
There's questions about, actually quite a few of them about, I mean, it's funny, the best way we know the play is working is when people, why didn't you say this argument, or why didn't you say this other argument? We've had that since the first reading. But there's a couple of questions just about homosexuality and the Palestinian cause. Mm-hmm. And sort of the intersection between why didn't you say that gays were thrown from buildings, etc., and talking about the anti-Zionism within the gay community. Do you have any thoughts to share?
I mean, again, like, there's only so much you can fit in a 2-hour play. Our director, Chloe, and I have this ongoing joke about the pamphlet, which is where we have put the pages and pages and pages of material that had at some point in time been a part of the play and is no longer part of the play, because ultimately we would like you to see a play and not a Wikipedia article.
Right. So that's where the Queers for Palestine are living, on the pamphlet.
I also just thought it felt like low-hanging fruit to me,
right.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the truth of the matter is, like, half of the characters are queer in the play. And, like, yes, that means they could talk about it, but I also felt it made it stronger to not talk about it and just let that be. Again, this play was never going to touch on everything. It was never meant to be the end of the conversation. It was always meant to be the beginning of one. So if you're leaving with questions, if you're wondering why I didn't say this or why I didn't say that or whatever, like, it's because I wanted you to be able to get out of here at some point. You know, I could have turned this into a 5-hour thing. I don't think anyone would have appreciated that, but it would have had everything. But actually not. It still wouldn't have had everything, and that's the point. That the play is meant to serve as the catalyst for the conversation, not the end.
So actually, that was going to be my closing question. But this doesn't have to be the closing question, but I'll ask it now. You know, you've sat with this play for so long, both of you. What do you want people to be walking away from it talking about?
Kind of whatever. Like, I want our audiences to go away and feel emboldened to have a difficult conversation, preferably with somebody they care about, who they've been avoiding having that difficult conversation with. And understanding that, again, discomfort is a feature of relationships. It is not a bug. So please go find someone that you have that you have some issues with, who has been close to you, and work to just reach across the divide. Just try to have the conversation. Maybe it'll go somewhere, maybe it won't, but then at least you know you tried. So just reach out, try to make the world a little bit better, try to bridge the gaps. And that's the way we can do it. It's one conversation at a time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Help us spread the word, and thank you so much for being here with us. Have a lovely Sunday.